All right, what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central. I am joined with me today by none other than a very special guest who has recently begun a new venture working for CHGO Sports, covering the Bulls, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You also know him as the former co-host of the Locked On Bulls podcast and formerly Bulls Outsiders. Guy's done a ton of work covering this team over the course of his career. It's my pleasure to welcome back on the show, Matt Peck of CHGO. Matt, it's good to have you back, brother.
Jamal, thanks for having me back on, man. It was a lifetime ago that we all caught that Bulls-Grizzlies game at the UC together, right? My God, how things have changed since then.
I'm telling you, man, I feel like I actually told a lot of people on my channel that I'm kind of a bad luck charm when it comes to the Bulls. The last time the Bulls won a game that I have attended was that game that I told you about back at the United Center in 2014. Granted, keep in mind, I usually attend games once a year when they play the Warriors, and the Warriors have kind of been dominant the last few years. But ever since that game, they've gone like 3-10, 3-11, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, they had a 5-game losing streak, and then they won those 2 games against Detroit and Cleveland, and then a 3-game losing streak, and then they got the win against Toronto, and now another loss. So it's been tough sledding, man, since that Grizzlies game.
Yeah. Now we'll talk about the Bulls, how things are going for the team right now. Do you want to talk about the season and, what's going on as it's winding down and looking ahead to the playoffs? But I actually wanted to start with your newest role at CHGO. Tell us a little bit about it, what you guys have been doing over there, for the viewers who maybe aren't aware of all the great work that you guys are doing and what we can expect from that pod going forward.
Yeah, so you were one of the first people that Dave and I kind of gave initial whispers to, because when we went to that game with you, we were in the stages of we had just signed the contracts, but it wasn't public knowledge yet, and we were still getting ready for our launch week. But essentially, this company that had branches in the Denver and Phoenix sports markets had this really successful business model about bringing content to sports fans, more so by sports fans, and sort of people like myself and Big Dave who have been always skating that line and that fringe of, some people would throw the word fanalist out there, and people who, want to provide content and modern and fresh content about the teams that they love and that they know that so many others out there love as well. So we got approached to become a part of the team for, their Bulls beat here at what they called CHGO. And our launch was March 4th. That was the first of the Bulls Bucks games in this month of March. And this past month has flown by. It also seems like we've crammed so much into it, but Dave and I are having an awesome time providing our Bulls fans with the same kind of content that we were doing before at Locked On. And now there's also a little bit more of an outsider's vibe to it, because we're doing stuff from, live together in studio. We're not just doing remote episodes with each other like we were doing for Locked On. We brought in Will Gottlieb, who's an incredible NBA mind, a great writer, leading our Bulls written content. Bulls fans might remember him when he was on the beat for the Bulls for The Athletic back in the 3 Alphas days. And we also got his podcasting partner, Mark Caranzola from Bulls HQ, another familiar name for those, people who can't get enough Bulls content. So it's a dynamite team. The other teams that they've assembled covering Chicago's other teams are also incredible people. It's been so much fun working with them at our studios here in the West Loop where I am right now. We just wrapped up a live podcast just a few minutes ago before I hopped on with you. It doesn't seem real, man. It's a dream. We're just hanging out in this big, beautiful, timber loft in the West Loop, TVs everywhere, beautiful state-of-the-art equipment, an amazing production team. And it's been a lot of fun.
No, I love your guys' new setup. You really hit it big with this one. If you guys haven't already, be sure to follow Matt on Twitter at Bulls_Peck. Be sure to follow CHGO at CHGO_sports. Go check out their podcast as well as their YouTube channel. You don't want to miss out all the great content there. Matt, like you said, you've got Big Dave, Will Gottlieb, Mark K. So I'll leave a link to all that in the description. So make sure you check it out, especially now that we're getting close to the playoffs. There's going to be more good stuff coming along the way from you guys, I'm sure. So Matt, let's talk about the Bulls, which I know is a little painful to do right now. I did catch your post-game show last night, which was actually great for me because as a frustrated fan, you want to see kind of other frustrated fans, commiserate together for that. But let's start with last night's game, which again, I know you were very candid about in your post-game show.
Yeah, last night got dark.
That's a good way to put it. I like it. But look, I mean, the Bulls' effort last night, we're talking about another example of a bad showing for the Bulls, because not only did they lose to another top team in the NBA, which everyone has been harping on for the Bulls, calling the Bulls frauds because they're like, 0-16 now against top 3 teams in each conference. But I talked about this on my channel. It's not the fact that the Bulls are losing these types of games, because in a way, you kind of almost expect a loss in last night's game. It was the second game of a back-to-back. The Bulls were on the road, and it's the Bucks. They're still one of the best teams in the NBA. They're defending champs. But it's more so how they're losing these games. What's sort of been your take on the Bulls losing all of these games to these top teams in the league? And what's sort of been the biggest thing that stood out to you in last night's game? I know you were talking a lot about, winning the battle versus not winning the game. Like, don't lose the battle and the game at the same time. It needs to be either or. What was your perspective? What was the biggest thing that stood out to you?
And as far as that stuff with Grayson Allen getting those 2 late layups that were way too easy back to back, to me, like that was the thing that pissed me off the most, because it was just twisting the knife after the knife was already in my back. Like that was why that was so frustrating to me, because it was the latest example of this Bulls team showing to me that they have some talent on this team. They are a lot better than they've been last season and all the seasons prior. But they have appeared to be soft at times, and that bugs me because, call me old-fashioned, call me a meathead. I need my Chicago Bulls to have some fight in them. And last night, that was the most frustrating thing to me, is not showing fight. When they get hit with that first punch that kind of stuns them, how do they respond? And last night in particular, like we've talked about the Bulls getting off to slow starts, especially on the road. Interesting changeup that we've seen from Billy in these last couple of games, putting Caruso into that starting lineup to help them get up to better starts. Because, last night it was 20-20 and it was back and forth. It was like 9 lead changes and 3 ties for the first 6.5, 7 minutes of that game. And then Billy went to his bench at the 3.5-minute mark of the first quarter when it was 20-20, and the first quarter ended 33-20. And I didn't necessarily think that the wheels completely fell off of the Bulls offense in that run, that 13-0 run the Bucks had. I still thought that they got some decent looks, that they were just decent looks that didn't go down. But the frustrating thing to me is that, as we've seen them do before this season, when that happens, the Bulls let it affect their effort and their focus on the defensive end. They're not getting back in transition. They're not communicating their assignments, their switches. They're not calling out screens. And that, like, as talented of a team as Milwaukee is, like you said, this is the defending champs, for crying out loud. They will take that little signal of frustration and use it against you. And all of a sudden it's a 13-0 run in 3 minutes. And then it, compounded at the start of the second quarter. And all of a sudden the Bulls are down 20 because they have a couple of empty possessions and they hang their heads and they're lost on defense. And like, wow, it exploded and spiraled really quickly.
Well, that's the thing that surprised me about this team, was that at the beginning of the year, they were very resilient in the way that they played. They wouldn't get their heads down, right? Like like a team would go on a bit of a run, momentum would shift, but they somehow would find a way to crawl back and win a game. You saw the Bulls coming back in a lot of games earlier on the season, which wasn't the case last year. And now you're kind of going back to the repeat of last year, where they do get frustrated, some empty possessions, they hang their heads down, and teams are picking up on that. And teams are, I was talking about this on my channel. I feel like teams are just simply figuring the Bulls out now. You double DeMar, you double Zach, run the pick and roll in the offense, because the Bulls aren't that great at defending the pick and roll. And if you do that, you're probably going to win, right? And so it's like, you got to be able to make those type of adjustments to make sure that people aren't going to be coming at you, and you can actually, do something that maybe is a little bit different to actually be able to walk away with wins instead of just mounting all these losses. But it's my perspective. I did want to talk about injuries because obviously the not the excuse, but the go-to response for why the Bulls aren't doing so well is because of injuries. Mm-hmm. Alex Caruso's back. Patrick Williams is now back. Lonzo Ball is not. We recently learned that Lonzo has had a bit of a setback, I guess, if you want to call it that. Essentially, the Bulls have said that Lonzo hasn't responded well to his rehab and that they're holding off on him running for another 10 days, I believe it was. What's going on with Lonzo? And do you think it's possible that we might not even see him return this season at the rate that his recovery is going? Because the regular season ends, 3 weeks from now?
Yeah. I mean, April 10th, I believe, against the T-Wolves is the Bulls' last regular season game. And it's March 23rd. So we are running out. I think Bulls fans still hoping for maybe we can get a few games of Lonzo to knock off the rust and see if he can get his conditioning back before the Bulls, face their first playoff test, whether that's a play-in game or game one of a series because they've managed to stay above that 7 seed. Is looking very unlikely at this point. It's obviously not a good sign that, de-ramping, not ramping up. He is going downwards on a down ramp as far as activity. And they, based on, team doctors' opinions and what they've discussed, they decided that the best bet at getting that bone bruise that went along with this knee injury of his fully healed is to just sit and rest for 10 days. Now, I'm no doctor, so, it's not like my opinion on whether or not that will work means a damn thing.
Right.
What I am concerned about is that you can make the argument that Lonzo Ball is the best two-way player that is on this Bulls roster. They are missing him on both ends of the floor. They miss his defense, and this Bulls team that has almost laughably low three-point shooting volume compared to the rest of the NBA, compared to modern day 2022 is what we're living in NBA. Yeah. They miss him so badly on both ends of the floor. If he's able to come back from this, arthroscopic knee surgery and the bone bruise on top of that to play in the playoffs, great. Like, you'll take what you can get, but I'm keeping my expectations fairly low right now for when and worst case if Lonzo comes back this season.
Well, so here's my thing about Lonzo, and I want to get your perspective on this because people have been following my channel for a while now. They know that last season, when all the rumors were surrounding the Bulls being interested in Lonzo, that those were running rampant, I was very vocal that although I liked the fit of Lonzo, he was a playmaker, a perimeter defender, which the Bulls greatly needed at that time. Lonzo wasn't the guy that I wanted for the Bulls, and injuries were a big factor in that, among other things. I was also skeptical whether he was going to be worth the kind of money that he was going to be commanding. I ultimately think that they did very well in terms of the overall package that they offered him. But I did question his motivation and energy a bit as a type of player that I wanted for the Bulls. But despite all that, Lonzo won me over, right, with his play and how he fit well into the lineup. But still, their injuries are a concern because every season in which he has been in the league, he's had an injury of some kind and has missed a fair amount of time. And people forget he's already had this surgery repairing that meniscus on that same knee. Like, we just signed this guy to a 4-year deal. He's only 24 years old with this many injuries. Like, yeah, you could say that this presents some major problems for the Bulls if this was the plan for him to be the point guard of the future. Are you concerned at all by the injuries? Or do you think, some people just have injuries early in their career and then they figure it out later on?
I think, honestly, it's so hard to tell. I think you were absolutely valid in your concerns. I have expressed similar concerns with other young NBA players or even players coming out of college that have had injuries that are concerns to me when it comes to whether or not the Bulls are looking to add them into a part of a core of a team that they're building. Do you want to be a competitive team? I was not as worried about that with Lonzo. And, who knows? Hindsight now, maybe I should have been. I kind of was thinking, he had that injury. He's past it. And, and out of the gate, looked pretty darn good. I also think back to Bulls fans wondering what the heck we were getting in Zach Lavine when that trade went down and he was a player on the shelf rehabbing a torn ACL. Going back even further, Bulls fans, hearts broken after Derek was never the same player after his ACL injury and then another meniscus after that. But I mean, like, each case is a special case. Each player is a different player. I have no idea what's going to happen to Lonzo Ball in his long-term NBA career and the length of this Bulls contract he's on with that knee. All you could do is cross your fingers and hope that this surgery has fixed it and that he will come back. And if sadly that does not happen for a Bulls playoff run this season, it means he has a full season or a full off season rather of rehabbing that knee and getting it in peak condition and ready to go for next season. Because injuries being a problem is certainly a reality. It's also a reality how much his presence is needed on both ends of the floor for this Bulls squad.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm hoping, even if it's, he misses the rest of the regular season, that he'll actually still be able to be back for the playoffs. The Bulls are absolutely going to need him. Let's talk about the playoffs, though, right? They're coming up around the corner. Yes, the Bulls are making the playoffs. I know a lot of Bulls nations have kind of gone into doomsday approach of the Bulls falling so hard in the standings that they're going to miss the playoffs by virtue of not advancing beyond the play-in.
Right.
But the Bulls are making the playoffs, in my
They're
opinion.
going to fall past the Knicks, right? That's what's going to happen.
I don't care what anyone else says. This team is making the playoffs. Even if they do fall into play-in territory, they will find a way to advance. But either way, as things currently stand, for those watching and recording this on Wednesday night, the Bulls are currently 5th in the East, a game ahead of the Cavs, 2 games ahead of the Raptors, and the Bulls are currently 2.5 games behind the Celtics for that 4 spot. So if the season were to end today, the Bulls would be taking on the Celtics in the first round, not having home court advantage. How do you like that matchup for the Bulls? And who do you think ultimately would win that series?
Bulls, Boston.
Knowing the Bulls do not have home court advantage.
I don't like that matchup at all. I mean, honestly, any matchup right now, if the Bulls are 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th, is not looking good because of the way that they're playing on the road. I mean, they are a completely different team. I think they're 26-10 at home, 16-20 on the road. So if the Bulls don't have home court, and it's looking more and more like that ain't happening, they're going to have to play a hell of a lot better than we've seen them play in this stretch out of the All-Star break and into March and the end of the season. As for Boston specifically, I don't think there's a better defensive team in the NBA over the past month or so than those Celtics. Like, man, they look good. And Jason Tatum is back to looking like Jason Tatum after whatever hiccups he was having earlier this season. Like first team all NBA caliber Jason Tatum. That's never somebody you want to go up against in a best of 7 series. And some of the other complementary pieces, Tatum and Brown, people talked about them as one of the best, tandems in the league. And then Boston just got off to that oddly difficult and sluggish start this season, and people were starting to write them off. Mm-hmm. And then everybody have been reminded recently, as they have flown up the standings, just how real the Celtics still are. It's not as concerning from a size matchup as some of the other matchups potentially the Bulls would face in the East, but on paper, which team would I give the edge to going into that? If Boston's got the home court and Boston squad is healthy and our squad is healthy, I mean, not overwhelming favorites, but I like Boston in that best of 7 series.
And that's the thing about Boston, is it's not even just them in the East, right? You got all these teams in the East that have been balling over the last couple of months, that have propelled themselves, right? You got Celtics going all the way to 4. They're, like you said, they've probably created enough separation where I don't even think the Bulls are going to be able to catch them. Then you got the Raptors. They're playing well. Obviously, the Nets, they're still the Nets. They got Kevin Durant. The Hornets are on a 5-game winning streak. The Hawks have been playing better. Like, all of these teams are showing up at the right time heading into the playoffs. And that just hasn't been the case for the Bulls. So let me ask you this, regardless of who the Bulls face in the first round, realistically speaking, how far do you see them going?
I would not be surprised to see them be a 1 round and done playoff team. I'm preparing myself for that reality. Will it be disappointing given the fact that leading up to the final days before the All-Star break, we weren't sure if Billy Donovan or Eric Spoelstra was going to represent, one of the All-Star teams as the coach, because Miami and Chicago were neck and neck for the 1 seed at the All-Star break. Yeah, when you put that perspective in, it stinks to think about a first-round exit for a team that was at the top of the East or darn near top of the East for the first 2/3 of the season. But I think you also need to add to that context the other, further zoomed out lens context of what exactly happened. The Bulls had a very friendly schedule out of the gate this season. A lot of subpar opponents or mid-level, mid-tier teams like the Bulls have proven themselves to be, and a lot of games at home. And they took advantage of that and otherworldly version of DeMar DeRozan, especially in fourth quarters of a lot of tight games, to build the win-loss record that they did coming into the All-Star break. But myself, my pal Mark K, a few other realists, as we got to the All-Star break, we're looking at the schedule after it and saying, hey, everybody, if you're thinking the Bulls are holding this 1 seed when we come out of the All-Star break and play these games between back end of February and the first week of April, y'all better adjust your expectations and do so quickly, because that ain't happening. And, so like coming into this season, assuming a healthy season for the most part, and assuming the East was being as stacked as it is, I was telling myself, if the Bulls managed 4th after 82 games, 4 seed, home court of the first round, I would be ecstatic. What I hoped was at least avoiding the play-in, prove that you belong at least in that mid-tier of East teams by getting that 5th or 6th seed. And after this huge roller coaster Bulls fans have been on, guess what? That's pretty much right where they are. So if your expectations were above that before the season started, or you adjusted them in season and now you're pissed, that's on you. That's my opinion anyway.
Well, and I think it's a good perspective to have for Bulls fans. You guys had me on Locked On Bulls right before the start of the season. It was actually during the preseason. You'd asked me what was my expectation of the Bulls? Where do I have them finishing the season? And I said the 5th seed is probably the most likely scenario. And here we are. Right. It's like, and that was and I didn't mean it in like, 5th seed would still suck. That would be disappointing. That was 5th seed. And that would be great because we've been bad for so many years. So I think it's true, right? It's like we got all these high expectations because the team was playing so well. And now they've kind of come back down to earth a bit, but they're still a much better team than we've seen in a long time. They're going to make the playoffs, like I've said. And, I think they'll still be able to make it at least a competitive series in the first round. Like you said, whether it's a one and done, we'll have to see what that looks like. Matt, I know you got to run. So last question. Bulls have got the Pelicans tomorrow night. Well, tonight, actually, for those watching, as I'll probably upload this in the morning. Must win for the Bulls, given this is an quote unquote easier game on the Bulls' remaining schedule. Thoughts? Who do you got? And obviously, you think it's a must win as well?
I mean, I think at this point, every game is a must win game over the final 10 to make sure that you avoid that play-in scenario. Obviously, getting the win Monday against Toronto was huge. That game counted as like 4 games. It counted as like 4 wins, essentially, when you looked at the odds of how the East seeds will break down. The Bulls got the tiebreaker over Toronto now. The Bulls have another game against Cleveland. We'll see how that shakes out. But yes, this West Coast trip, we talked a minute ago about how this team has struggled so mightily on the road this season. It's all winnable games. Like most of the winnable games the Bulls have left this season, or, the best odds at winning the season are games 2, 3, 4, and 5 of this 5-game road trip. Because then you still got to play Boston again. You got to play Miami again. You got to play Milwaukee again. You need to get some wins on this road trip. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if the season's, it's not like the season ends if they don't get this win in New Orleans on Thursday night, but you better do everything you freaking can to get that win like they did against Toronto, because every win counts at this point.
Absolutely. Matt, as always, my man, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. Keep up the great work on CHGO. Love what you guys are doing over there. And remember, guys, go check out the channel at CHGO. The link is in the description. Give Matt a follow on Twitter. Thanks again, Matt. Best of luck to you, buddy.
Jamal, appreciate you, buddy. Keep up the good work and enjoy life out there on the West Coast. All right.
Thanks, man. You take care.